Welcome back, everyone. When it comes to discounting, I've shown you how to use the formula. I've shown you how to use it in the financial calculator and in Excel. And I've also talked about the context of discounting in other videos with real examples. So if you haven't had a chance to look at those, please go back and watch those. But here, we're going to get into the really fine details of why discounting is what it is. Even for me, it took me at least a day of really hard thinking on how to communicate discounting, okay? So, understanding discounting. Why is $1 today worth more than $1 tomorrow? Now, one thing that is key here is that when we say, why is $1 today worth more? I want you to specifically think about value. Okay, value, not necessarily the dollar amount, but the value of that dollar. Okay, but before we get into understanding discounting, we need to understand the discounting rate. I thought about this a lot. We just take the discounting rate as something that's given to us, okay, but not really understanding the source of the rate which we're discounting that future those future dollars. A lot of times we just say we're using a discounting rate of 6%, and you're like, well, okay, that's great, and then you do the math, right? But let's really understand the discounting rate. The discounting rate is comprised of what I would say are three main categories. We have our opportunity cost. Oh, I don't like the way that we have our opportunity cost. We have our inflation, and we have the risk associated with collecting that money down the road. Okay, if you've ever lent someone money, right, and expect it back, there's inherently risk that you may not get that money back, right? So we take into consideration these three building blocks, and we come up with a specific discounting rate. We weigh each of these to figure out. So there's really no formula. Some of it actually comes down to how you feel about each of these. Obviously, when you're dealing, let's say, with a contract, this is something that's going to be negotiated, or you're going to explain we use this discounting rate, but it's important that you understand what that discounting rate means and what the elements of that discounting rate are, okay? So discounting, really simple, because I've already explained this in another video. It is, what is a future dollar worth right now? So let's say someone promises you, and I used the same example in the other video. Let's say someone promises you $105 1 year from now. Well, if we discount that at 5%, we know that $105 is only worth $100 in hand today. Likewise, if somebody offers you $148, sounds like a lot more, right? 8 years from now, but discounted at that 5%, you get back to the same $100 today because it's so much further out, right? There's so much further out. So there's a lot more years to discount. But don't get lost in the numbers. Just remember that discounting is what is a future dollar worth right now. Okay? Now, so why is a current dollar discounted if they're worth more? So remember, I gave a hint earlier. We're talking about value. I sometimes think students get confused with the actual dollar amount, right? Well, $105 is more than 100, so the 105 is worth more. But that's not true. It's not worth more. It's just more money, right? If you have $100 today, you actually can do a lot with that money. What can you do with $100 today as opposed to being told, hey, wait a year and I'm going to give you $105? Well, these are generally your options. You can invest that money and maybe you can make the same rate or a higher rate and get more money at the end of the year. You can use that money to pay down debt, which will save you in interest payments in the future, right? Or you can spend that money on goods and services. But all of this you can do today. You don't have to wait a year out into the future to get your money. So all of this relates to something something called opportunity cost that we're going to talk about. Okay. So I hope that was clear. It's better to have your money in hand today than to wait a certain amount of time and get it in the future, even if it's more money, right? Given a specific discount rate. So the main drivers behind discounting, remember my pyramid, right? They are opportunity cost, inflation, and risk and uncertainty. And we use these three inputs to come up with a discount rate, right? We use these three inputs to come up with a discount rate. The opportunity costs are what I just mentioned, which we're going to talk a little bit more here. So opportunity cost, right? That's what, if you had the money today, you could do these things with that money. And I already touched a little bit of on base with that. So again, if you had $100 today, you could invest it, let's say at 8%. At the end of 1 year, you would have $108, right? Or maybe you could invest it in something more speculative, right? And you could actually get, let's say, a 22% return, and you would have $122, right? As opposed to waiting a year and only having $105. So you're missing out on the opportunity to invest it in something that may provide you a higher return. Okay, that's the opportunity cost. Of course, we said you can pay down debt, saving you in interest payments down the road, saving you money, or you can spend it, right, in goods and services. So that's what you can do with your money. By waiting, right, you forego the ability to do that today. You miss out on the opportunity cost. Okay. So inflation, tomorrow's money buys less. For those of where this is an interesting time period, because I think that if you go back 5 years, your money went a lot further than it did today. So inflation is the general increase in prices over time, right? Which reduces the purchasing power of money. So remember the example I gave you. Somebody promises you 8 years from now $148. Well, you don't know, maybe that $100 in purchasing power today is equivalent to $148 8 years from now. So you're actually standing in place, right? You're not really, in terms of what you can buy. Let's say you go to the grocery store, not even 8 years. Let's just do 1 year. In 1 year, this is important. This is at a discount rate of 5%. In 1 year, you'll get back $105. But what you could buy at the grocery store for $100, now in 1 year, you need $105. You see what I mean? So this is really important. So this $105 is actually worth $100 today because they purchase you the same amount. You see that this is what it's worth. That 105 is worth $100 in today's money. That's why the dollar amount is actually smaller. Okay. All right. So I don't want to beat that point to death, but I hope I got my point across there. Lastly, risk and uncertainty. The future obviously isn't guaranteed. So the longer the time horizon, the greater the uncertainty. Let's say that you are going to go work for a startup and they say, we're going to pay you guys in stock, right, as a bonus, but you don't get your first payout until 5 years from now or 10 years. Let's say 10 years from now. Well, it's a startup. You don't really know if that company is going to be around for 10 years. It could go bankrupt. There's an uncertainty. There's a risk you're taking on. So therefore, the discount rate should be higher on that level of risk. Okay. So going back to, I hate to go all the way back to my pyramid here, but right, you need to measure each one of these. Each one of these is going to help you decide, there's a lot of risk associated with me receiving that money in the future. So I'm going to add more because of that risk. Or if I just received the money today, I have a lot of great investment opportunities, so I'm going to add to it. Or let's say there wasn't a lot of great investment opportunities. Maybe this block doesn't, or pyramid doesn't take on as much weight. And also, if you're in a high inflationary environment, you're going to add to this discount rate, right? Giving you your total, right? And so I'll leave it at that. I just want to say that the higher we make the discount rate, right? So let's say, for example, you see we have a 5% discount rate here. If we actually made this, for example, 10%, this $100 would actually be smaller. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but my guess is that from 105 back 1 year, this would actually be like $96, right? And if we increase the discount rate even further, right, this would probably fall into the 80s somewhere. So you see, as we increase the discount rate based on our evaluation, the dollars in hand actually become smaller and smaller. Okay, all right, that's a little deviation. Okay, so we were talking about risk and uncertainty. Now, in my prior video of this, I talked about Ohtani's $700 million contract. If you haven't seen that video, that's a great video. Go back and watch that. I'll link it here somewhere. Now, what's interesting here is that his contract is a 20-year contract, and it's split into two parts. It's split into the first 10 years and into the last 10 years. So the first 10 years, he's getting $2 million a year, $20 million total, and then $68 million a year, $680 million total, right? So if I was his financial advisor, I would have to be supremely confident that the Dodgers are going to be around for 20 years, right? But given the fact that he's this megastar, he's building the value of the Dodgers, they're going to keep winning, and therefore, if they keep winning, they become a dynasty, and then therefore the value of the Dodgers increases and increases. So actually, if I go back to my pyramid here, I'm not so concerned, right, with the risk of not getting paid with the Dodgers. So this one actually comes down a little bit, but I actually take into consideration the opportunity cost and the current inflationary climate. Those they take on a heavier weight. So I hope that example helped with what I was trying to point out here. Okay. All right. So in summary, waiting for money comes at a cost. Okay. The opportunity cost of not using it now and the risk of never getting that money in the future. So I hope that this video really got into the finer details of discounting, and that you can feel confident about understanding what discounting is, some real world examples, the elements that come into play when it comes to the discounting rate, and why the value of $1 is worth so much more in hand today than $1 in the future, right? Okay, I will leave it at that. I'll see you guys in the next video.